Melissa Wilson gazed out the living room window at the suburban Boston landscape where fallen leaves danced in the wind. She gripped a letter from the hospital in her hand, her fingertips trembling slightly. Her face showed clear signs of exhaustion. "Mom, I finished my homework." At Oliver's voice calling from the living room table, Melissa quickly slipped the letter into her pocket. Her expression softened naturally when she saw her 8-year-old son's smile. Oliver's brown hair had grown a bit long, and his big blue eyes seemed to mirror her own. "That's wonderful, Oliver. You worked hard today." Melissa sat on the sofa and checked her son's math workbook. 3 months ago, her divorce from her ex-husband Thomas had been finalized, and she had moved with Oliver to be closer to her parents' home. Their small apartment was far from luxurious, but she managed to get by with her nurse's salary from the community hospital and occasional help from her parents. "Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house tomorrow?" Oliver asked. There was a hint of tension in his voice. Melissa took a deep breath. "Yes, we are. Tomorrow's Sunday, so we're invited for lunch as usual." Oliver nodded silently. He was a smart child and vaguely sensed how stressful these visits were for his mother. Carol, Melissa's mother, had never provided her with a warm relationship. Carol and her husband George ran a well-known insurance company in town, and their refined lifestyle commanded respect in the local community. For them, appearances, and keeping up appearances, were paramount, and Melissa as a single mother and Oliver, sometimes labeled a problem child, were elements that disrupted their perfect family image. "Oliver, go get ready for your bath. I'll heat up dinner in the meantime." After her son left the room, Melissa took out her cell phone while operating the microwave in the kitchen. The call history showed 3 missed calls from her sister Amy. She let out a deep sigh before pressing the callback button. "Finally you called me back." Amy's voice always had a sharp edge to it. She was in charge of the marketing department at their parents' company. "Are you bringing anything for tomorrow's lunch?" "Good evening to you too, Amy." "I'm fine, thanks for asking," Melissa replied sarcastically. "I'll bring a salad." "Really? Again? Can't you make something more elaborate? Mom often worries about your cooking skills." Melissa closed her eyes, trying to maintain her patience. "A salad will be fine."
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Besides, Oliver hasn't been feeling well lately. Another excuse. Amy's voice turned cold. "Aren't your son's problems simply because you spoil him too much? No wonder Thomas left." The words cut like a knife, but Melissa didn't argue back. Amy was in her 2nd year of marriage but still had no children. She couldn't understand the challenges of parenting, much less the struggles of a single mother trying to balance everything. "I'll be there at 11, Melissa changed the subject. "Anything else you need?" Mom said to make sure Oliver dresses properly. The jeans last time were much too casual. After hanging up, Melissa rested her forehead on the counter. Her relationship with her family had always been like this, a never-ending cycle of criticism, expectations, and disappointment. The decision to move closer to her parents' home after the divorce for financial reasons had come at a significant emotional cost. "Mom, my stomach hurts." Melissa turned at the sudden voice. Oliver stood in the hallway, having lost all color in his face. He was pale, with sweat running down his forehead. Melissa rushed to her son and placed her hand on his forehead. It was hot. And in the next moment, Oliver's legs gave way, and he lost consciousness in her arms. That night, in the emergency room of the local hospital, Melissa sat beside her son's bed. The doctors had run blood tests repeatedly and asked numerous questions. Oliver had finally fallen asleep with sedatives, but the doctor's expression was grim. "Ms. Wilson, we'll need to run more detailed tests tomorrow. There are several concerning aspects to your son's symptoms." The doctor's words were cautious, but as a nurse, Melissa could sense the gravity behind them. She stroked her son's hair with trembling hands as he lay in the hospital bed, thinking they probably wouldn't make it to the family lunch tomorrow. The next morning, a series of tests began. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Parker, the attending physician, led Melissa to a quiet consultation room. His expression made it clear this wasn't good news. "We have Oliver's test results," he said in a lowered voice. "Unfortunately, your son has developed an extremely rare autoimmune disease. Treatment options are limited and..." As Dr. Parker continued, Melissa's world began to crumble gradually. "How much time does he have?" she asked in a voice surprisingly calm even to herself. "With current medical science, approximately 6 months. 6 months. Just past Christmas, before Oliver's next birthday." A clock began ticking in Melissa's mind. Limited time. The last months with her son. And how to break this reality to her family. She gazed out the window at the Boston skyline, steeling herself for the battle ahead. For Oliver's sake, she needed to be strong. And she hoped, with a faint glimmer of hope, that her family would truly become family during this difficult time. In the hospital parking lot, Melissa turned off the car's engine and rested her forehead on the steering wheel. Oliver was asleep in the back seat. 3 days had passed since her meeting with Dr. Parker, but the words, 6 months to live, wouldn't leave her mind. Today, she had to share this reality with her family. She checked her son's sleeping face in the rearview mirror. Exhausted from tests and medication, Oliver slept with a peaceful expression. The thought that her time to see this face was limited made Melissa's chest tighten. The Morrison's spacious 2-story White House came into view. Melissa took a deep breath, parked the car, and gently woke Oliver. "Oliver, we've arrived at Grandpa and Grandma's house." He nodded, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mom, I'm okay," he suddenly said in a mature voice. "Tell Grandma and Grandpa not to be scared, okay?" Melissa was touched by her son's mature thoughtfulness and held back tears. "Yes, I promise." Amy opened the front door. She wore a perfect blonde hairstyle and an expensive cashmere sweater. "Finally you're here," she said, looking at her watch. "Mom and Dad are waiting in the living room. Lunch is 3 hours late because of your cancellation." Melissa didn't answer and headed to the living room with Oliver. Carol and George sat on expensive leather sofas, both dressed elegantly, reflecting the success of Morrison Insurance. "Melissa, being late is impolite," Carol said coldly. However, when she noticed Oliver's pallor, her expression softened slightly. "What's wrong, Oliver? Are you feeling unwell?" Melissa seated her son on a small sofa and knelt to meet him at eye level. "Oliver, may I speak with the adults alone for a bit? Would you mind resting in Aunt Amy's room?" Oliver nodded silently, and Amy reluctantly escorted him upstairs. When she returned, Melissa stood before the entire family. "I have something to tell you all," she began with the coolness of a professional nurse. "Oliver underwent emergency tests last weekend. He has..." Her voice caught here. "He has an extremely rare autoimmune disease. With current medical science, treatment options are limited." She explained all the test results and diagnosis in detail. And finally, she spoke the heavy words, "According to the doctor's assessment, Oliver has about 6 months to live." Silence fell over the room. Carol covered her mouth with her hand, and George frowned. Amy sank deep into her chair, surprise spreading across her perfect face. "No way." Carol finally spoke. "Our grandson. Is there really no treatment?" "They'll try cutting-edge treatments, but the success rate is low," Melissa answered. "The medical costs will be substantial. Parts not covered by insurance will." "Don't worry about money," George said immediately. "I'll provide the necessary funds. Find the best doctors." Melissa felt slightly relieved. There was hope of family support. But that feeling was short-lived. But, Melissa, Carol chose her words carefully. What will you do? Can you continue working? If not, we could take care of Oliver here. No, I'll care for him, Melissa answered firmly. I'll take leave if necessary. I want to be with Oliver. In the evening, Amy called her to the kitchen. Oliver was taking a nap upstairs. How do you plan to handle this? Amy asked in a low voice. A single mother with a seriously ill child. I'll manage, Melissa answered succinctly. If you ask me, Amy said while pouring tea, this is a kind of blessing. For both you and Oliver. What are you saying? Melissa's eyes widened. It might sound cruel, Amy lowered her voice, but Oliver has always had problems, hasn't he? Behavioral issues at school, wasn't that one reason for your divorce? And when he's gone, you can start a new life. Melissa felt intense anger. My son is not a problem. He is my everything. At that moment, a noise from the hallway made Amy quickly change the subject. Carol entered. Melissa, next weekend is Thanksgiving. Let's celebrate with the whole family, Carol said. I think it's important to maintain normalcy for Oliver's sake. Melissa nodded. Thank you, Mom. After Carol left, Melissa gazed out the kitchen window at the garden, where she saw her mother and father talking in hushed tones. She felt compelled to move closer and listen to their conversation. She opened the window slightly and listened. Poor child, Carol's voice was audible. But considering Melissa's burden, perhaps it's a kind of mercy that it won't drag on. Yes, George agreed. I'll cover the medical expenses, but I want to avoid further interference in her life. She's caused us enough trouble with her divorce and child rearing. Melissa felt her legs grow weak. Her family viewed Oliver's illness as an opportunity for reducing the burden. That night, on the way home with Oliver, Melissa made a firm decision in her heart. She would create the best memories for her son in the time he had left. And she would protect him from her family's coldness. The following week, Thanksgiving preparations began. Melissa helped at Carol's house between work hours. On the surface, everything appeared normal. However, she began to sense a coldness in her family's conversations and glances that she hadn't noticed before. The day before Thanksgiving, Oliver was unusually energetic. Mom, I want to bring something to dinner tomorrow, he said. Melissa hugged her son. Of course, Oliver. Let's bake a pumpkin pie together. While making the pie, she wondered how tomorrow's meal would unfold. Thanksgiving with the whole family gathered. What would it mean for them? Melissa looked at Oliver's smile and resolved to do anything to protect him. The next morning was bright. Melissa sipped coffee while gazing at the leaf-strewn garden from the kitchen window. Normally a day to celebrate gratitude and family bonds. But this year was different. Anxiety and determination mingled in her heart. Mom, don't forget the pie. Oliver appeared in his pajamas. His cheeks had more color than yesterday, and his smile had regained its innocence. The medication must be working. Melissa smiled as she stroked her son's head. Of course not. I would never forget your special pumpkin pie. She prayed silently. Just for today, she wanted Oliver to have a peaceful time. He had so few days left. At 3 p.m, they stood at the Morrisons' front door. Melissa took a deep breath before knocking. Carol answered, wearing her perfect hairstyle and an elegant dress appropriate for Thanksgiving. Welcome, Carol said with a smile. Everyone's already here. Relatives had gathered in the living room, George's brother and his wife, Carol's sister and her husband, and Amy with her husband Michael. Everyone stopped talking when Melissa and Oliver entered, their eyes showing sympathy. The news of Oliver's illness had likely already reached the entire family. Melissa, it's been a while, George's brother Henry said. It must be tough, really. The words trailed off, and the atmosphere grew heavy. Fortunately, Oliver didn't notice the adults' awkwardness and had already settled in front of the TV with his cousins. "Thank you, Uncle Henry," Melissa replied with a smile. "But today, I just want to enjoy Thanksgiving." Carol's voice called from the dining room. "Everyone, dinner is ready." The magnificent dining table was set with traditional Thanksgiving dishes. A large turkey at the center, surrounded by cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and sweet potato casserole. At the end of the table sat the pumpkin pie Oliver and Melissa had made. When everyone was seated, George raised his wine glass. "First, I want to express gratitude that our entire family could gather here today," he said, lifting his glass. "And I'm thankful for the blessings of this year." Everyone clinked glasses. Melissa sat next to Oliver, smiling gently at him. Just then, her eyes caught a glance exchanged between Amy and Carol. There was something dark in it. Carol stood up and took her place in front of the turkey. "Once again, I'll do the carving," she said. She took the long knife and fork and began cutting the turkey with practiced hands. "Now, who shall I serve first?" she said with a smile. "Oliver, shall we start with you? You have a special place, after all." Oliver nodded happily, his eyes sparkling at the turkey breast his grandmother served him. "At this rate, you'll be even thinner next year," Carol said casually. "But don't worry. Grandma will make sure you get plenty of nutrition." The atmosphere at the table froze for a moment. Everyone was struck by the implication of Carol's words. Oliver paid no attention and reached for the food, but Melissa gave her mother a sharp look. Carol pretended not to notice and continued serving the next person. "Amy, how about you and Michael? Are your baby-making plans progressing?" Amy shifted a bit and replied, "Not yet, Mom. But we might have good news by next year." "Wonderful," Carol said with satisfaction. "This house needs more children's voices." From the end of the table, George's brother Henry cleared his throat. "Well, it's Thanksgiving. Let's all enjoy ourselves." For a while, conversation continued on topics like weather, politics, and sports. Melissa barely touched her food, watching over Oliver. He seemed to have an appetite for the first time in a while, eagerly eating mashed potatoes and gravy. Halfway through the meal, Carol raised her wine glass. Her cheeks were already flushed from the wine. "Everyone, I'd like to make a special toast," she said. "Life has its difficult periods. Especially when facing illness or other problems." She glanced briefly toward Melissa and Oliver. "But it's during difficult times that we grow stronger. Let's toast to Melissa and Oliver's courage." Everyone raised their glasses. "To Melissa and Oliver." But Carol continued. "And let's toast to the reality our family is facing," she said with a smile. 6 months to live. Then here's to the day when the burden disappears." The moment the words were uttered, the table froze. But soon Henry gave a small laugh, followed by other relatives. Perhaps it was laughter to relieve the anxiety-induced tension. But to Melissa's ears, it sounded like laughter of agreement with a cruel joke. Oliver looked up at his mother with a confused expression. "Mom, what did Grandma mean?" Melissa couldn't answer. Her entire body trembled with anger and sadness. At that moment, Amy stood up and walked over to Oliver. "Don't worry about it, Oliver," Amy said in a sweet voice. As she stroked Oliver's head, she continued, "Mom and Dad have an unusual sense of humor. Next year we'll have one less seat. But a real family is enough, right?" At the words, "real family," something broke decisively within Melissa. She slowly put down her fork and gently took Oliver's hand. "Mom?" Oliver asked anxiously. "It's okay, Oliver," Melissa said quietly. Her voice was strangely calm. "We're finished with our meal." Carol hastily said, "Melissa, It was a joke. Don't take it seriously. A joke? Melissa stood up quietly. My son's life is a joke. The room fell silent again. Melissa, George spoke up. Mother has had a bit too much to drink. Sit down and continue your meal. No, Dad, Melissa said clearly. I can no longer tolerate this family's hypocrisy. Oliver, put on your coat. We're leaving. Amy raised her voice, being dramatic again. Typical Melissa. Unable to accept reality. Melissa stood Oliver up and placed her hand on his shoulder. Reality, she said quietly. The reality is that you're all looking forward to my son's death. Is that a real family? How dare you say such things, Melissa? Carol exclaimed. We just what? Melissa looked straight into her mother's eyes. I overheard you. Considering Melissa's burden, it's a kind of mercy that it won't drag on. Heavy silence fell over the room. We're leaving, Melissa said resolutely. Oliver, say goodbye. Oliver was confused but obediently said, goodbye. He still couldn't fully understand the situation. As Melissa led Oliver out of the dining room, she heard a small voice behind her. Turning around, she saw Amy standing next to the pumpkin pie. Melissa, Amy whispered. I'm truly sorry. There seemed to be genuine regret in her voice, rare for Amy. But now, Melissa's heart was full of determination. In the car on the way home, Oliver was quiet. Eventually, he asked, Mom, are we not going to Grandma's house anymore? Melissa looked at her son's face in the rearview mirror. Not for a while, Oliver, she answered quietly. But it's okay. We have our own path. That night, Melissa sat at the kitchen table, pondering over scattered documents. Oliver was already asleep. She stared at the papers before her, health insurance statements, hospital bills, bank account statements, mentally calculating over and over. Will this be enough? She whispered. Hours after the Thanksgiving dinner incident, a plan was forming in Melissa's mind. What she knew as a nurse was that only one hospital had made Oliver's diagnosis. Perhaps there was still room to explore other opinions, other possibilities. Her cell phone rang. Amy's name appeared on the screen. Melissa hesitated before answering. Melissa, Amy's voice was trembling. I'm truly sorry about what happened. Mom and Dad are reflecting too. Could we talk again tomorrow? Amy, Melissa said quietly, what happened today is just a manifestation of long-standing issues. For you all, Oliver and I have always been problems. But I'm ending it now. What do you mean? Anxiety mixed into Amy's voice. Goodbye, Amy. After hanging up, Melissa took a deep breath. Her plan was clear. She would withdraw her savings tonight, take only the essentials, and disappear with Oliver. Without her parents' help, she would seek a second medical opinion in a new place. She quietly headed to the bedroom and packed the last items into an already prepared bag. An envelope of cash hidden at the back of the closet, her emergency fund that she had saved bit by bit since the divorce. It wasn't a large amount, but it would be enough to start a new life. Oliver, she gently woke her son. We're going on a little trip. Are you ready? Oliver nodded, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Mom, where are we going? On an adventure, Melissa smiled. A secret adventure just for us. The highway was empty in the middle of the night. Melissa drove west. Her destination was Rochester, Minnesota, a city with a world-famous medical center. As a nurse, she thought they might get a new perspective on Oliver's illness there. Mom, didn't you tell Grandma and Grandpa? Oliver asked from the back seat. Melissa looked at her son through the rearview mirror. No. This is our trip alone. For a while, let's spend time just the two of us. The next morning, they arrived in a small town several dozen miles from Rochester. Melissa headed to a budget motel she had researched in advance online. When checking in, she used a false name, Charlotte Brown and Ben, a combination of her maternal grandmother's name and a character's name from a book Oliver liked. "We'll be staying here for a while," she told the front desk clerk. "My son is receiving treatment." That afternoon, Melissa called the medical center in Rochester and made an appointment for Oliver. She sent the medical records she had brought along and asked to be seen as soon as possible. "Mrs. Brown, your child's condition is indeed serious," the receptionist nurse said. "I'll put you on the cancellation list, but it might take several weeks." "I can't wait weeks," Melissa pleaded. "Please, isn't there any way to see someone sooner?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "Actually, we just had a cancellation for the day after tomorrow. Would 8 a.m. work for you?" "Thank you so much," Melissa said, tearing up. "We'll definitely be there." On the way back to the motel, she checked her phone's call history. There were 23 missed calls combined from her parents and Amy. After hesitating, she turned off the power. 2 days later, they sat in the medical center's lobby. Oliver anxiously held his mother's hand. "Mrs. Brown," a nurse called. "This way, please." They were led to a spacious examination room. Soon, a middle-aged female doctor entered. "Mrs. Charlotte Brown and Ben," she smiled kindly. "I'm Dr. Martin. I've reviewed all the records you sent." Melissa squeezed Oliver's hand. "So, is the diagnosis correct?" Dr. Martin chose her words carefully. "The basic diagnosis itself is probably not wrong. Your son's symptoms and test results do indeed indicate a rare autoimmune disease." Melissa's heart sank. However, the doctor continued, "the prognosis from the Boston hospital might be a bit extreme. Also, we've just started an experimental treatment program here. Your son might be eligible." Hope returned to Melissa's eyes. "Experimental treatment?" "Yes. It's still in early stages, but we've seen promising results in similar cases. Of course, it's not covered by insurance and will be expensive, but..." "Cost is not an issue," Melissa answered immediately. She was prepared to use up her savings. "I'll do anything to save Oliver." The following weeks passed like a whirlwind. Melissa settled in the motel and began working as a temporary nurse at a local hospital. With Dr. Martin's recommendation, Oliver was able to participate in the experimental treatment program. The treatment was harsh. Oliver suffered from various side effects but endured bravely. Melissa worked during the day and spent nights by Oliver's side. "Mom," one night, 3 months into the treatment, Oliver woke up in bed. "Don't you miss Grandma and Grandpa?" Melissa placed her hand on her son's forehead. There was no fever. "Do you miss them?" After thinking for a moment, Oliver slowly shook his head. "No. I like it here. Everyone is kind." Melissa smiled. They had moved out of the motel into a small apartment. The locals were warm, and Oliver had started attending a local school between treatments. There, what had been labeled as his behavioral problems were understood to be manifestations of creativity and intelligence. 6 months after starting treatment, Dr. Martin called Melissa in. Her expression was bright. "Mrs. Brown, wonderful news. Oliver's test results are improving. His symptoms have stabilized, and his autoantibody levels are decreasing." Melissa listened to the doctor's words in disbelief. "That means he has lived beyond the predicted 6 months. And if we continue this treatment, there's a good chance for further improvement." Melissa hugged the doctor, crying. "Thank you. Thank you so much." That night, Melissa and Oliver sat around the small dining table in their apartment. Before them was a small cake, a 6-month survival celebration cake. "Mom," Oliver said with a serious expression. "I'm not going to die, right?" Melissa took her son's hand. I will absolutely not let you die. We'll be together from now on. I promise. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall. Melissa stood with Oliver by the window, watching the falling snow. The decision on Thanksgiving night had changed their lives forever. But it was also an unexpected beginning of hope. In her heart, the pain of the past was gradually healing. Oliver, hurry up. We'll be late. In the kitchen bathed in spring light, Melissa was packing the last pieces of fruit into her son's lunchbox. Outside the window, the garden trees shimmered with new greenery. I'm coming. With the sound of footsteps running down the stairs, Oliver, now 13, appeared. He had grown taller and, while still bearing traces of his former self, was transforming from a boy into a young man. His blue eyes still shone as brightly as before, but now with newfound confidence and strength. Nervous about your science project presentation? Melissa asked, kissing her son's cheek. Not at all. Oliver took his lunch and stuffed it into his backpack. My teacher said my research is good enough for the state contest. Melissa smiled proudly. 5 years into treatment, Oliver's condition had been declared in complete remission. His immune system had miraculously recovered, and now only quarterly checkups remained as a vestige of his treatment. I'm off then, Oliver said, heading for the door. Oh, right. Can I go to Tom's house after school today? We're continuing our science project. Of course. I'll call Tom's mother too. After seeing her son off, Melissa opened her laptop. She now worked as a manager in the hospital's medical administration department. She had switched careers from nursing, choosing a job with more regular hours so she could cherish her time with Oliver. While checking her emails, a special newsletter caught her eye. It was from her hometown's local paper. Opening the page casually, she gasped. Morrison Insurance files for bankruptcy, founder couple victims of fraud. According to the article, George and Carol Morrison had fallen victim to investment fraud and lost most of the company's assets. Furthermore, Amy was under investigation for misuse of company funds and had resigned. Melissa stared at the screen, filled with complex emotions. For 5 years, she had reverted to her maiden name, Wilson, and cut off contact with her family. She didn't even know if they had searched for Oliver. That night, after Oliver had gone to bed, Melissa sat on the porch, looking up at the starry sky. Around her was her chosen family, Dr. Martin, hospital colleagues, neighborhood friends. They had warmly welcomed and continued to support Melissa and Oliver. Watching the stars twinkle, Melissa made a decision. It was time to return to her hometown and face her original family. Not to forgive, but to show how strong she and Oliver had become. And to teach them what a true family means. Oliver, she asked her son at breakfast the next morning, how about a small trip during summer vacation? Would you like to visit the town where Mom grew up? Oliver thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, I'd like to go. Will we see Grandma and Grandpa? If you want to, Melissa said quietly. But remember, we have a real family that we've created here. Oliver smiled understandingly. I know, Mom. A real family is the people who stay with you when times are tough. Melissa was touched by her son's wisdom and took his hand. A new chapter awaited them. A journey to face the past and demonstrate the true meaning of strength and love.